The topic is Investigate Computer Forensics, Current Best Practices for Data Collection and Analysis. Please welcome Mr. Erik Laykin. A warm welcome, please. Round of applause. Thank you. Mr. Erik Laykin is on the advisory board, is board member of Kornerstone Institute, past president, FBI InfraGuard, managing director of Duff and Phelps. Mr. Laykin focuses on large-scale international corporate investigations in which computer forensics and electronic discovery plays a major role. Erik regularly comments on technology matters at industry conferences and for the media. I'm sure some of you must have come across and have watched Mr. Laykin on CNN, Fox, ABC, NBC, and CBS. He has participated on a number of advisory boards, including the California Judicial Council Subcommittee on Digital Evidence, the California Department of Insurance Anti-Fraud Advisory Task Force, and the Electronic Commerce Council. Erik, I'll leave it to you.
Thank you kindly. It's a pleasure to be here. It's my third time speaking at the Risk Symposium, and it's a great honor and a pleasure. So I'd like to thank Kornerstone and Catherine Chan, and of course I'd like to thank all of the sponsors, including Deloitte, who have made this morning and afternoon session possible. So my topic is investigative computer forensics, and oftentimes when folks speak on this topic, they drill into some very specific technical issues. I've decided to keep it a little broader in the context of really the holistic approach to risk management from the technology perspective and from the perspective of combating real-world cyber risk and real-world issues as opposed to the ethereal. So my agenda will talk about some contemporary risks and realities. I'm going to talk a little bit about typical data breach investigations, what the forensic expert's role is in incident response. I'll talk very briefly on the litigation support areas, including what is known as the electronic discovery reference model, which is important in the U.S. jurisdictions and increasingly important in foreign jurisdictions. I'll talk a little bit about what expert testimony can be provided by forensic experts, and then I'll talk about some typical remediation steps after a data breach, and then of course if we have time we'll go into some final thoughts and questions. This slide here I think illustrates some of the primary points that I'd like to try to get across this morning with the limited time that we have. There are a variety of contemporary risks and realities that are converging today that are making it much more difficult for businesses to deal with the risks of cybercrime and evidence management and proving a case and bringing perpetrators to justice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And here they are. First, there's a proliferation of offensive computing, computing tools. These tools, 20 years ago, hackers would build tools in their spare time themselves, and they would deploy them. Today, you can download them off the internet, and there's a commercialization of the hacking community, which is the second point. And because of that, any person with some very rudimentary knowledge of computers can effectuate some pretty dastardly crimes on the internet or attacking a company from within or from an external perspective. A third fact that needs to be borne is there's now a borderless computing environment. Today, a hacker can just as easily be sitting in the Ukraine as he could be Bakersfield, California, or right here in Hong Kong. The effect is the same. It's very easy to spoof your identity, etc. So it's very difficult from a forensic perspective to capture information and to be able to prove a case. Then you have jurisdictional uncertainties and challenges. Still, the world and in the U.S., even state by state, it's a patchwork of different, sometimes overlapping statutes and laws and regulations related to how to go after some of these crimes. Then there's a shortage of skilled first responders. Companies have a very difficult time staffing for these positions. And fortunately, here at the Risk Management Conference, I think for those of you who are looking at careers or in midstream careers in this space, I think there's a lot of opportunity for those that are interested in risk management from a technology perspective. Real shortage of good qualified folks who can not only manage the the sort of the data protection and the data handling, but also think outside the box a little bit with their corporate entities and provide guidance as to how to respond to a cybercrime or any other type of event that requires a computer forensic response. And then trusted insiders pose the largest risk. I could talk all day long about the different types of risks that are out there, but trusted insiders, from my perspective, are often the most dangerous risk. I mean, the biggest, of course, we all know about in Hong Kong is Snowden. He was the ultimate trusted insider, and we all know what happened there. I'm going to share with you a couple of slides here that illustrate how some of these different points. And I talked about the proliferation of hacking tools and of knowledge. And I'm going to show you a couple of quick slides here that I think are kind of interesting. This is a photograph of a conference breakout session at Defcon. Defcon is the world's largest hacking convention. It takes place in Las Vegas every year, and it used to attract 2,000 hackers from around the world. Last year, there were 20,000 hackers who attended Defcon. They pay in cash, so you don't know who they are, and they listen to these wonderful presentations on how to do bad things or how to do good things, how to protect, how to destroy, and how to do interesting things using technology. So, this particular session that I'm showing you is a breakout session on how to compromise SCADA systems. A SCADA system, for those of you who are not familiar with that space, is essentially a system that will manage a large infrastructure installation and will manage access controls to that system. So as an example, when the attack on the Iranian centrifuge machines took place in Iran with the Stuxnet worm a few years ago, that was essentially an attack on a SCADA system. Well, here in this breakout session, you've got a world-leading expert on SCADA systems from Texas, who's standing up there, talking about how to break into oil and gas infrastructure systems, the electrical grid, and other interesting devices that we rely upon. Here's another session I attended that was kind of fun. This is training how to hack cell phones and other hardware devices. Now, what you can do is you just walk into the room, you sit down, and they will give you all of these tools to play with, and you'll have an instructor, and he'll show you how to break into a telephone, hack into it, plant a malicious piece of software, etc. And you have no idea who you're sitting next to, right? The blonde lady there may be a hacker from Finland, but the other blonde lady next to her may be an IT consultant from France. You just never know. So here's a very scary session. This was training to circumvent physical seals. Now, physical seal is a seal that you use to preserve evidence, a physical piece of evidence, like a bag of evidence. Maybe there's a bloody garment or something, and you seal it. Well, this session trains you how to break that seal and replace the seal without anybody knowing that you've tampered with it. That's super frightening, right? You can't even trust the seals that the police are using now. And who are all these people in this room learning about these techniques? This session went on for 3 days. It was just sort of a rotational thing. And I sat there and learned for 2 hours. Terrific. Here's the annual hacking contest. This is a Chinese team in front. They were leading, no doubt. And this goes on for 4 days. It's a game called Capture the Flag. And eventually somebody is able to break into the server and raise their hand and say, "We won." And for the last couple of years, there's been some very interesting teams competing in that game. Then there's a whole session where you can go and buy interesting, fun tools. And I talked about the proliferation of easily available hacking tools. Well, here is something that I went and purchased. There was a long line of people standing to purchase one of these. It's called a Pineapple, and it's a little Wi-Fi hotspot that you can place into a corporate environment, and it's hidden, and it will allow you to own the network, essentially, as long as you can find the right, the appropriate holes in the network. This will serve as a man-in-the-middle, what should I say? There's an attack called a man-in-the-middle attack, where you have a server, or you'll have an individual, in this case the Wi-Fi Pineapple, that is serving to gather information as it's traveling across the network. So folks over here are sending emails to those people over there. The Pineapple is in the middle. It's collecting everything and continuing to pass it along. So nobody knows that it's happening. Eventually, the bad guys, they go back into the company and they retrieve the Pineapple, and they're able to capture the information, kind of like a keylogger but wireless. Or you can even remote into it. Here's another fun one. This is called the rubber ducky. Excuse me. And those in Hong Kong, you all remember the rubber ducky that was here. This is a new rubber ducky, and it's a little thumb drive. And essentially, you stick it into the back of a computer, maybe your coworker, maybe your boss, maybe you're going to a company for an interview, and while you're waiting in the waiting room, you slip it into the back of the receptionist's computer. Nobody knows the better for it, right? It just happens to be sitting there, and it's capturing keystrokes, and it's capturing wireless traffic going back and forth on the network, and you're able to remotely log into it and then try to find a way to break into the network and steal the information that you're looking for. Fascinating device. They were selling like hotcakes. I wish I'd come up with it. So here's an example of how this type of device can really do some big damage. The Saudi Aramco hack a year and a half ago was as a result of one of these devices. Now, Saudi Aramco, the largest state-owned organization in Saudi Arabia in the oil and gas sector, had a large network of systems. They knew that they were being threatened by the Iranians with attack, both cyber attack and otherwise, and they took great precautions to mitigate this risk. But unfortunately, somebody on the inside, a trusted insider, was able to take one of these devices, plug it into one of their internal systems, and that whole internal corporate network got compromised. 30,000 computers were destroyed as a result of the attack, and hundreds of folks from the U.S. had to come out and assist Saudi Aramco to get them up to speed. Here's another interesting weak link: the interconnectivity between companies. So this is something that people often don't think about. Every company has a vendor. Many companies have hundreds of vendors. Many companies have vendors that remotely connect into their systems in order to manage certain transactions. In this particular case, I've got a company called Fazio Mechanical Services out of the east coast of the U.S. who supply air conditioning units to a company called Target. And this company, this air conditioning company, was attacked by the bad guys, essentially. And through that link to Target, malicious software was placed on the Target systems, and that is what resulted in what is today the largest data breach in U.S. history, through a third party, a trusted third party who simply had some remote access. So in a typical data breach investigation, you have a number of things one should consider, from data identification and preservation to managing your internal communications, assembling teams to be able to respond quickly. I like the idea of doing fire drills. With our clients, we try to recommend that they go through tabletop exercises where they actually experience a mock data breach so that they will know how to respond when it happens. Many of our clients, what happens is they will they'll have the data breach, but they don't know who to turn to. And when you're in a real pinch and you have to respond quickly and capture that evidence quickly, the last thing you want to do is try to figure out what resources you should call upon. So being prepared in advance can give you a real leg up. When a cyber investigator is looking at sort of the traffic and movement on the internet, sometimes they look at a graphic like this. This is a graphic showing actually a map of the internet. More specifically, they may look at a tool like this. This is called Sentinel Analyzer, that allows an investigator to monitor traffic between various points. And if you're lucky enough to grab log files and other related forensic data quickly, you can reconstruct the data flow and try to understand how data may have moved from point A to point B, who may have stolen trade secrets, how somebody may have broken in. Here's another example of a screenshot. The forensics expert's role in incident response is multifaceted. And they include things like data preservation and analysis. That's the sort of the first line of defense. A forensic expert is charged with going out and capturing the evidence. And if you're in a role of risk management and you're counseling your client as to how to best protect yourself, one of the first things you should be doing is ensuring that you have a forensic expert identified either internally or externally who knows how to come into your operation quickly and preserve evidence, so that if you have a data breach or you have a rogue employee or a CEO who is charged with some terrible crime, you have the ability to get in quickly and capture that evidence. I can't tell you how many times my clients have waited and weeks go by and months go by, and by the time they actually get to the evidence, it's overwritten, it's no longer usable, the hard drive has been provisioned to a new employee, whatever it may be, and they end up losing the case. They can't solve the matter, whatever it may be. There's a few other things on this list which you can certainly review at your own leisure, but the forensic expert's role is pretty multifaceted. In the old days, we used to use tools like this. This is a tool called Camtasia, which actually would take a video of what was happening on the screen. Is before we really had good forensic tools to use. You'd use this to actually record what you were seeing on the screen. But in today's world, you have lots of great forensic tools to use, and there are a wide variety of well, let me say this: you have tools that focus on hard drives. You have tools that focus on networks. You have tools that focus on social media. Here's a forensic toolkit. This is what a typical computer forensic examiner may carry into the field to go collect a bit-by-bit forensic copy of a hard drive. But maybe the crime is on social media. Maybe you have to collect evidence on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube. Well, then you'll use this tool. It's called X1 Social Discovery. That's now the state of the art for collecting data off of the internet, particularly from social media sites or from cloud-based computing environments. When you look at how to collect data, your team has to have a holistic approach to this thing, because people are no longer sitting on standalone computers with one hard drive. Everybody's interconnected. My Nokia Windows phone here has more power than my computer did 20 years ago, and contains more data than I'll probably ever read. It's amazing. So you have to have the ability to quickly capture from a variety of sources. So if you have a forensic expert who's working for you and they tell you, well, I'm really good at collecting hard drives, well, you have to ask them, what else can you do? Have you ever collected from the cloud? Have you ever collected from a RAID server that is 10,000 miles away? Whatever it may be. There's a variety of questions you have to ask yourself. Here's a quick primer on how data is stored on a hard drive. This is a hard drive, for those of you who have never seen one with the top taken off on the top. And these are a couple of the basics of how they work. You have platters and you have heads here. The platters spin, and you have the heads that are reading and depositing data across the platters as they spin. A typical hard drive spins at about 7,200 RPM, and as it's rotating, the actuator arm over here is depositing, I should say it's changing the sectors and the bits to ones or zeros, essentially. I'm going to simplify this. And as you drill into it, you end up with sectors that have either have data or don't have data, and if they have data, they're either marked as active data or inactive data. There's a whole area of the hard drive which we call the unallocated space, and the unallocated space is all the data that you deleted that is still retrievable. And using computer forensic tools, you can go recover that data. So, but the problem with hard drives is that they deposit data to the drives randomly as they're spinning. So the longer a hard drive is in operation, the greater the chances that something may actually get deleted. So as an example, here I have a hard drive. We have 3 files that are on it, and it's fragmented and it's spinning. And then somebody maybe well, actually, I'll show you this one. So you have unallocated clusters, which represent the colors, and the blue, and allocated clusters, which represent the colors. Those unallocated clusters in blue still contain data, but the operating system is told that they're available for overwriting. So what the forensic examiner does is he preserves the hard drive and in such a way that it cannot be altered, and he also captures all of this unallocated space. It's very different from simply doing a copy of a hard drive or Norton Ghost or whatever it may be that a typical IT technician will use. In the forensic examination, you're capturing this unallocated data so that you're able to recover data that has been marked for deletion but is still available. So you see on this particular image all these unallocated clusters. This is a defragmented hard drive. This shows you how all the data has been moved to the center of the drive for efficiency, but you still have lots of unallocated sectors. So this is when you're looking at a forensic tool like EnCase. This is an old screenshot of EnCase 3. I think we're on EnCase 6 or 7 or 8 now, I think. But what this shows you is that when you look at the unallocated space of a hard drive, you're seeing all of this text. And you can see that it's sort of random, right? And if you have keywords, you can start to search. So let's say you're looking for HTML data. I can look for that HTML tag using the forensic software in the unallocated space. Let's say I'm trying to recover a web browsing session of somebody who is accused of child pornography. That's how you'll do it. Data can reside on lots of systems, as you can see from this. I have a case right now where the entire case is hinging on data that is residing on a Canon copier. And Canon copiers have hard drives, and this is a large multinational fighting another large multinational for tens of millions of dollars. And the entire case comes down to, did the individual of concern scan and email a document? Well, we're in the process of reconstructing that now from a Canon copier. Here. New devices, new challenges. Cell phones, of course, billions of cell phones around the world. I'll briefly show you some cutting-edge stuff now with cell phone forensics. We've had a number of interesting cases lately where we've tried to reconstruct data that has been deleted, primarily text messages off of cell phones. It's very challenging because there's so many different systems. There's no standardized tools. It's pretty Wild West stuff. But here's a motherboard of a cell phone with the chips. The newest state-of-the-art in forensics for cell phones is chip-off forensics. This is the tool that we use. Essentially, we take the motherboard of the cell phone, we place it in this device, and the device that you see in the middle there is a heat lamp, and we heat up the chip on the cell phone to a very high temperature. Right now, it's at 208 degrees Fahrenheit. We bring it up a little higher, about 300 degrees, and what happens is we're able to melt all of the connectors around the chip, and then you can see we're removing the chip off of the cell phone board now. And then we take the chip and we place it in this device, which allows us to read the chip using our own hardware and our own software, regardless of the cell phone, and extract out the raw binary data from the chip and then reconstruct it based on whatever programming language was originally written in. Technology fraud investigations, there's a real nexus between these issues of technology and fraud and investigations, more so now than ever before. When we were first focused on this space many years ago, and I have a couple of wonderful colleagues in the audience who I've worked with over the years. I'm sure they can attest to it. Back in the old days, it was, the forensic space was very focused on just capturing the evidence and trying to articulate, is this email real? Did the individual do this? Did the individual do that? Did they go to this website? Did they not? Etc. But in today's world, the technology and the fraud and the investigation is taking on much more complex, perspective, I think, and the role of the forensic expert is much more front and center, I think, in many of these investigations. And I list a few of them up here. Lehman Brothers, that was an investigation that I was on for about a year and a half. I led the forensic team that captured all of the historic data out of Lehman Brothers to reconstruct how they failed. And we were able to reconstruct electronic data going back years off of 1,800, well, we started with 1,800 separate systems, and we then had to drill down and determine what systems were relevant and try to make heads or tails out of it. Madoff, same thing. We were very involved in that matter. We're not involved in Snowden, but all of these matters target the U.S. DOJ trade secret investigations that are going on right now. The new scandal in the U.S., the IRS lost email scandal, where the IRS said that they lost all the emails of the primary people involved in the center of the scandal. All of these things, they end up focusing on the electronic data. And so those that can get in quickly and preserve data and work with investigators or the corporate decision makers or attorneys will be well suited. So a couple of final thoughts. One last slide from Defcon, just for kicks. You see all these folks here. I remember I was talking about how you just never know who you're going to be next to. And this goes for this audience too. I've got no idea who most of you are. I hope to meet as many of you as I can. Looks like a great audience. But you just really never know in today's world. Who's the bad guy? Is it him? These are fellows walking through the hallway at Defcon. And I just took this random picture and I thought to myself, how do you identify who the bad guy is? Is it this guy here with the mohawk? You know, he looks like your candidate, right? But maybe not. Maybe he's a terrific person. Maybe it's this guy looking at his cell phone, or maybe it's this guy over here, very engrossed in his texting, or that guy over there. You just never know in today's world who is going to be the challenge for you. And in the world of managing fraud investigations internally within an organization, that's where this really comes in. For those of you interested in this topic, my book came out recently called Investigative Computer Forensics. Happy to explore that with you. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me or call me. It's a pleasure to be here in Hong Kong at Kornerstone, as always. This is a wonderful conference and a wonderful organization. If we have time for one or two questions, I'm happy to do that now. Thank you.
Okay, my question is, the forensic tools seems very fantastic for today's development. My question would be, if those forensic tools be used by hackers, would this be also a great hacking tools?
Absolutely, great question. So, the question is, are these terrific forensic tools, can they be used by hackers as well? Absolutely. There's an entire movement which they call the anti-forensic movement. The anti-forensic movement is primarily people who are trying to reverse engineer forensic tools in such a way that you can modify data so as to either obfuscate what happened or to destroy data. So yes, the forensic tools can be used by hackers, as any tool. You know, a tool is a tool. You can use a tool in any way you like. A hammer is a tool. You can use it to build a house, or you can use it to hit somebody over the head with it. Absolutely, and that's a concern, because now we are finding cases where we have to try to defend an issue in court related to a particular piece of forensic evidence that has been presented, and we have experts who get up and they say, well, if you use the forensic tool in an anti-forensics manner, you can modify the time and date stamps, and it'll look just as if it was normal. And they may be right, in which case you then have to find other corroborating evidence to try to bolster whatever the position is that you're trying to take. So absolutely, that's a real concern, the anti-forensics movement. Certainly, thank you. Any other questions?
Has the cost of computer forensics discovery gone up with the advent of more SSD drives and stuff like that?
Great question. You know, the cost of e-discovery and forensics has been an issue globally for litigants, defendants and plaintiffs, as well as corporations, and the issue has been that the training and the experience and technology that goes into building a terrific forensic team is often translates into pretty high fees, and so forensic technologists or e-discovery technologists can command very high fees in today's marketplace. In fact, we just had a case in Los Angeles 3 weeks ago in which it's called a cost shifting argument that we had, where one side was trying to get the other side to pay for the costs. And the argument that the other side made was, well, your forensic team, they're charging too much. How can you charge so much money for this simple technology work? And they quoted what their IT team would ordinarily charge. And our response was, yes, well, the IT team charges X because that's what the market will bear. There's a much broader pool of individuals who understands a traditional network technology or traditional programming than the much smaller pool of people who understand forensics and e-discovery and who are qualified to testify on those issues. So as a result, they get much higher fees. So in today's world, yes, the cost is very high. I anticipate that it'll continue to level out and maybe slide down a little bit as more companies adopt these techniques internally. Good question. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this. And Catherine Chan.